UKIP debate on Brexit and rural areas. I call on Neil Hamilton to move the motion. Neil.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I see from the number of empty seats in the chamber today we've reached the dog days of summer, but we are left at least with the cream of Assembly members to listen to this debate. And the essence of this motion is localism and devolution. And that's what the Brexit process enables us to extend. But I want, before going on to the motion, to address the amendments. I don't know why the Conservative group always has to delete everything in our motion and then put down something which is almost identical. This kind of predatory behaviour of gobbling up our motion is most reprehensible, I think. But there is nothing that we can disagree with in the Conservative amendments, apart from the words "delete all" and replaced with. And of course, I do understand that Plaid Cymru has a different view about the EU withdrawal bill from us. But I do think, for reasons which I explained yesterday, that those fears are misplaced. The First Minister chided me yesterday as having changed my view in some shape or form, that as a result of Brexit, all the powers currently enjoyed in devolved areas by Brussels shouldn't come to the Assembly. I still believe that very strongly, and I do repeat what I've said many times before, that Wales should not be a penny worse off as a result of leaving the EU. In terms of public funding, and therefore that every penny of what the EU now currently spends in Wales should be added to the Welsh Government's block grant, so that we can then, as an Assembly, decide on our priorities. And, of course, this is vitally important to rural areas in particular, because agriculture and the environment are those areas of policy where there is greatest scope for devolution from the European Union. But although I'm not inclined to trust Theresa May on much, I do think that it would be very difficult to imagine circumstances in which the government could resile from such categorical statements as the one that I quoted yesterday, where Theresa May said in the House of Commons that no decisions currently taken by devolved administrations will be removed from them. And indeed, the Secretary of State, Alan Cairns, said as recently as the 23rd of June, when asked by Paul Flynn in a written question in the House of Commons whether any additional legislative competences will be devolved to the National Assembly as a consequence of leaving the EU, he responded, the government expects there will be a significant increase in the powers devolved to the National Assembly for Wales as a consequence of the UK leaving the EU. And as the government has already said that it will seek a consent motion in this Assembly as part of the process, clearly we do have a lever there to ensure that those categorical statements are delivered upon. So I have no fears about the EU withdrawal bill posing in any way a threat to our powers, and there will be no land grab, and the government will be very foolish to try to do so. There's nothing in it for them to gain from that. But we have to accept, I think, that Britain is part of the United Kingdom, and negotiating international trade agreements is a UK competence, and the government can't put itself in a position where, say, for example, Nicola Sturgeon would seek to hold them hostage pending the actual exit process. So it's clearly vitally necessary that there be this kind of transitional stage, but at the end of it, when all those powers have been restored to the United Kingdom from the EU, that our fair share of what we are due under the existing devolution settlement should be brought here to Cardiff, so that we can take the important decisions for ourselves. As a representative for Mid and West Wales, of course, I'm acutely aware of the importance of this to our constituents. I believe that the opportunity to devolve most agricultural decisions, despite the fact there will inevitably need to be significant agreement between the various nations of the United Kingdom on certain frameworks to mutual advantage subsequently. But nevertheless, it's vitally important that we should be able to make our own priorities for ourselves. And I don't have any fear also for farmers and others involved in agriculture that markets are going to disappear and their livelihoods are under threat. We have a massive deficit in trade with the EU on food and drink. And if the EU were to be so foolish as to refuse to enter into some kind of free trade successor agreement with us, then we would be able to expand our home market very significantly for most agricultural products. Lamb is the only significant problem, in my opinion, in this respect. But the figures involved are relatively small as part of the total budget. So whatever the outcome, whatever the difficulties, and there are bound to be pluses and minuses in any huge change of this kind, we should be able to accommodate them comfortably from within the Brexit dividend. For every £5 which farmers currently get from the EU, we pay £10 to Brussels in order to get it. So there's plenty of scope there for us to tweak the system. So I'm not pessimistic about that at all. But the advantage of more localised decision-taking is that we're no longer making these important decisions on a continental scale. That's the big problem with the CAP. There are 28 countries, and we have to have an agricultural policy that works all the way from the North Cape down to Greece and Gibraltar. And with climatic and topographical conditions being so varied, inevitably, Wales gets the short end of the straw. But when we are in charge of our own agricultural policy, we'll be able to tailor-make an agricultural policy specifically to the needs of Wales, and a very good thing that would be too. And we'll be able to make our own decisions on matters like herbicides, for example, and animal welfare, and we'll be able to... Sorry? Well, they may well be, but if decision-making bodies are over-regulating, that's a matter of significant concern to us. The EU wants to ban Asilox, for example, which is very important in the control of bracken on the hills. And we've had an annual exemption from what they want to do for the last 6 years. We'll be able to decide for ourselves whether that's a sensible policy or not, which it isn't. The EU may want to get rid of glyphosate as a weed killer, which we buy in supermarkets as Roundup. This is not a sensible decision, but we'll be able to take that decision in future rather than unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. Farmers have enormous problems with cross-compliance because at the minute they have to dot every I and cross every T of the complicated regulations which the EU imposes upon us, and we'll be able to go through the whole gamut of such regulations for ourselves to decide which of those we want to keep, which are excessive and which we can dispense with altogether. So all in all, bringing decisions down to the lowest sensible level is, I think, a vitally important and valuable thing for us to be able to do. And the other parts of our motion, which refer to other areas of that kind unrelated to the EU, for example, consultation on closure of rural schools, or decisions about the siting of wind farms, for example, vitally important, I think, in terms of maintaining the purity and integrity of our wonderful landscapes in mid-Wales. I don't like to see forests of windmills popping up on the hilltops. And of course, they're deeply unpopular in the communities which have them plonked upon them. And we don't have to get into arguments about climate change and man-made global warming in order to advance this argument. Because even if you accept the theories of man-made global warming, it must be obvious that the contribution which can be made to the solution of problems of climate change by having an extreme view of siting wind farms in inappropriate places makes no real contribution to the solution of the problem at all. But people's lives are wrecked. And if we had some local means of control, then we would be able to block such decisions. So it's vitally important to us that we take proper cognizance of the special problems which exist in areas where we have sparse populations and difficult transport links, and we have the constitutional means of addressing them in the most in the most efficient way. And I believe that leaving the EU contributes to that process, although it's not the be-all and end-all of the entire thing. But if we take fishing, for example, again, very important to us, Mid and West Wales has probably about 75% of the coastline of Wales. And the common fishing policy has absolutely devastated the fishing industry in the whole United Kingdom. It's been an ecological disaster as well, as we all know, with the policy of discards. I give way happily, yes.
I remember a few years ago going to visit the Welsh Sea Fishermen's Association, when at one point the Spanish, there was a big issue about the Spanish in Cornwall, and they were burning Spanish flags in Cornwall. I went to visit the Sea Fishermen's Association of Wales, who was led by one Mr. Gonzalez. What had actually happened is that the Welsh fishermen had sold their quotas to the Spanish. So to blame the EU for that, I think, is disingenuous.
Well, I mean, that of course, is a distraction from the real issue. That before 1973, the EU had no effective fishing waters, and as a result of our joining, the CFP was cobbled together in order that British waters could be plundered, the result of which has been that our fishing industry is now substantially smaller than it was 40 years ago. The number of fishermen is down by 40%, and the number of vessels is down by 28%, and we've lived through an ecological disaster in the North Sea and elsewhere, which is widely recognised. I'm not going to take a second intervention, I'm sorry. The member can make her own speech, and I hope she does. But it does give us the opportunity to revive the Welsh fishing industry, and not just inshore fisheries, of course, which are not affected by the CFP, but to go further afield. I don't think you'll find many people involved in the fishing industry that think that the common fishing policy has been the boon that some members seem to think it is. But the result has been industrialised fishing on a massive scale, which has put small fishermen out of business, and we'll be able to make significant changes to that. So there are many reasons why we should support this motion, but as I said right at the start, this is all about bringing down decision making to the lowest possible level, so that ordinary people can feel they have a real role to play in the processes by which their lives are to be controlled, and representative bodies such as this, elected by the people, ultimately bear the full responsibility for taking those decisions, and we are accountable to the people. That doesn't happen at the moment.
Thank you very much. I have selected the 2 amendments to the motion.